I would like to extend a warm welcome again to all members of the Place and Sustainability Overview and Scrutiny panel, officers, members, and members of the public and press in attendance at today's meeting on the 18th of July 2024. Welcome to those who may be watching the meeting live on YouTube. I'm Councillor Steve Rippon-Swain, the Chairman of the Place and Sustainability Overview and Scrutiny panel. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping note.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I would remind those in attendance to use your microphone when speaking and remember to switch it off once you have finished speaking. Please switch any mobile phones to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting, along with any laptops and other devices. If the fire alarm rings during the meeting, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit, but do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point, which is located at the bottom of the car park by the garages. Thank you.
Please would members introduce themselves during the meeting, if not already introduced by name. And could I ask also officers, if brought to call, introduce themselves, their post, and a brief line as to their responsibilities, please. Right, agenda apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Craze. Any others? No, thank you. Minutes, item 1 is minutes to approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 7th of March and the 13th of May 2024. Are we in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are asked if they do have any interest to declare.
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Alvin Reid, representing Milford. I'm obviously keenly interested in item 4 on the menu being part of my patch. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If you think of it as we approach, Councillor Park.
So I should probably mention that I work for a civil engineering company that works with marine sort of civil engineering projects, but there's no immediate interest that I think is necessary to declare.
I think you're right. Anyway, it'll be noted. Thank you very much. Item 3, public participation. There are no public here. And then on to item 4, the Christchurch Bay and Harbour Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management FSERM strategy. And asking for Steve Cook, please, if you'll present the paper.
Yes, evening all. Thanks, Chairman. So yeah, I'm Steve Cook, Service Manager for Coastal Services. So looking after the Coast Protection Team here at NFDC. And yeah, here to present the report for the Christchurch Bay strategy project. So that strategy is covering the coastal frontage from Christchurch Harbour, so that's our neighbouring authority, BCP, through to the start of Hurst Spit. And members be aware there's a further strategy covering the area from Hurst through to the eastern side of Lymington River. That strategy is currently in development, being led by the Environment Agency and is due for completion around September time 2026. So those two strategies cover sort of the western side of the district. And then for the remainder of the frontage, Lymington to Redbridge, there's a further strategy that may be considered by the Environment Agency. It's in their longer term forward plan, but not likely to commence until after completion of the Hurst to Lymington strategy. And that will be subject to the need that's identified through there and any funding availability. I think worth noting that we're focusing on the western side of the district because that's where we are exposed to the greatest risk through storm impacts. So yeah, this strategy is saying being led by actually BCP Council and then NFDC and EA. We're working in conjunction with them as key partners in the delivery of it. Commenced long time ago, back in 2021. And it has been fully funded through grant aid provision to the via the EA to BCP Council. What's happening now is the work's been completed, and through the respective councils, we're looking to take the strategy to through the adoption process. Following that, it will then be submitted to the EA for their assurance process. Currently, expectation is that that's likely to be completed probably the early part of 2025. So with us hopefully adopting around September time and BCP on a slightly later programme around October for their adoption. I think important to note, for members to note, so if and with NFDC adopting the strategy, what it doesn't do is guarantee any funding that comes through from the Environment Agency or central government. And crucially, it does not commit NFDC to any funding provision to support the projects that are being identified. And another point of note is that we as a local authority, Coast Protection Authority, have no statutory measures or statutory duties to deliver coast protection across our frontage. So the strategy sits at the second level of coastal management. Members probably familiar with the 2 shoreline management plans we have across the district. So it sits just below the SMPs, in the middle of that, with then schemes at the lower level. So your SMPs provide the overarching sort of management policy. The strategies then delve into the detail of the risk, costs and options that can be delivered, and then your schemes is the delivery of projects that may come out of that. Christchurch Bay strategy, it's looking at future long-term flood and erosion risk over 100 years. So sort of long time into the future, but those impacts through climate change, sea level rise, current asset measurement and so on. Looking at the impacts, property, assets, and environmental impacts as well, and really then considering how those risks can be or may be addressed in the future. What it is doing is aligning with the SMP policy, so the policies we already have around our district, which may be hold the line, manage realignment, no active intervention. So the strategy sort of aligns with those identified policies and looks to deliver options that are technically, environmentally, and crucially financially viable as well. So on a wider basis, we're looking at not just our district, but as I say, we're spanning BCP as well. So you really are trying to consider the whole coastal processes across Christchurch Bay and not limiting them to administrative boundaries of the councils. And that can enable options to be considered and coordinate with adjacent management units, and really say assessing those full coastal impacts, and sort of combine with that as well, looking at options that can complement each other, enable sort of efficiencies to be gained in delivering those options as well. So if you're doing a similar project across councils, you know, don't limit that to one district. You can spread your project across the 2 boundaries there. So I think for us, it's sort of quite key to note that the defences across our frontage, Christchurch Bay, are generally coming at the end of their life. There's been assessments done again through the development of the strategy with that. We have seawalls, particularly the Milford-on-Sea frontage, that are generally approaching 70-year sort of lifespan now that since they've been built. And I think members will be aware of the issues we've experienced in the past. So beach volume losses, seawall failures, sort of impacting on the defences and the integrity of those defences. And sort of recently we've experienced that obviously at Hordle Cliff, and back in 2020 with the seawall failure at Milford-on-Sea and Westover. So this strategy is sort of looking to start to address those failures that we're seeing. So around risk, so for the NFDC frontage, there's just over 1,200 properties identified as being at risk of erosion over the 100-year lifespan. not quite an even split, but fairly even between Barton-on-Sea and the sort of Milford-on-Sea frontage, and just shy of 140 properties at potential flood risk, and that's at Milford at sort of the eastern end of the strategy area. In conjunction with that, for NFDC itself, there's obviously impacts around the public car parks we've got around the coastline there, public toilets, beach huts, as well as many of the other sort of assets and infrastructure around the Christchurch Bay frontage. So the strategy sort of considered options that could be delivered to provide protection, say, to those properties at risk. And those are based on sort of national, local and backup options. They are fairly similar. So the national and local options generally align with delivery of the same project. Where they vary is over the timescale of that delivery. So the local options generally being sooner, because locally there seemed to be a greater need. The national options, which align with sort of Treasury rules, come in a little bit later, but they are essentially delivering the same piece of work. So as a general summary, Barton-on-Sea project, that's what's being considered there is cliff stabilisation works and drainage works, so sort of addressing those impacts of groundwater on the cliffs there. Hordle Cliff to Milford, generally a combination of rock structures there and beach recharge, with also works to sort of existing sea walls and groins systems. So generally, though, recharge is that sort of initial sort of project coming forward. Where the challenges come around with these is the grant aid funding. So that's funding that comes through Environment Agency and central government. So the assessment's done using Treasury rules, sort of assess that grant aid rate as being fairly low, and typically for our frontage it's around 11% to 26% of the scheme costs. BCP, I would say, are in a similar position as well, so that there's similar rates of grant aid that may come through. What that essentially means is that balance, that funding gap, then needs to be secured through partnership funding, and that is the challenge that faces us. And I think in many meetings I have with members and the public always talk about that partnership funding challenge. So there is more detail in the report, and there's obviously a significant amount of papers there with details, but as a broad summary, the Barton-on-Sea scheme is in the order of £27 million of work. The GIA that's potentially available for that is only just over 3 million. So, we can already see there is a big funding gap there. For Hordle to Milford, depending on the projects that's put forward, we've got schemes in the order of 10 million up to 30 million. And again, with a grant aid figure of only around £4 million. So again, significant partnership funding requirement there. So across sort of the next 20 years, and it will depend what schemes are selected, and we try to take forward the funding requirements are in the order of sort of 40 to 50 million pounds. But it does give a pretty sort of broad feel of the significant costs that are involved. I think I'd add as well, so since 2021, while we've been developing the strategy, there have been a lot of engagement events. I know lots of members here have come along. We've either to events we've had here, we've had at Milford, they've been at Christchurch, and online briefings, both for members and the public. Really great turnout, and lots of those, particularly at Milford-on-Sea, so a lot of local interest. And we've had officer briefings as well here. So I think there's a lot of awareness across the council of the sort of requirements that are going to be needed if we're going to deliver these projects. So I think finally what we're looking at here is for the panel to recommend that this goes forward for adoption, and then will be taken to Cabinet and Council. Accepting that there is a risk to property, a significant risk to property. There are big funding challenges for us to look to try and sort of collect that funding together, not necessarily to fund, but for us to act as an authority that looks to try and draw funding in from many other options and funding streams that may be available. And sort of noting we also we have no statutory duty to do this, but we need to try and strive to do this and deliver these schemes. And I think in taking them forward, we would look to continue to work with BCP and the Environment Agency in funding streams, investment planning, and efficiencies that can be gained in sort of working together to deliver those projects. So that's probably a fairly short summary of what is a very lengthy piece of work that's been, say, ongoing for sort of 3 years or so. So yeah, we're sort of open to any questions there may be.
Thank you very much, Steve. One question I have really is I'm a little disappointed in the option development unit 15, which seems to have the least work programmed for it to retention. And behind it, unfortunately, is, of course, Barton-on-Sea Golf Club. So from that point of view, a little bit disappointed, but hope we can hang on to some of it. Yes, Alan.
I know the amount of work that's gone into this, but is there any way we can say we'd like to go ahead with it, provided we can get the funding? Because we can't afford to say we're going to go ahead with this and then have to fund it ourselves somehow. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, Councillor Glass, the key point is adopting the strategy is not committing NFDC to funding. So it's not committing the council as a whole to securing 20-30 million pounds. What it's doing is setting down a marker that, as I see it, there's a risk identified, there's options identified that can be delivered subject to funding, and NFDC act as a bit of a sort of facilitator in trying to draw that funding together. What the strategy really supports as well is in submitting business cases to the Environment Agency for funding, and other organisations, or however we may do that, is that there is a identified plan and solution. And without having a strategy in place, we wouldn't even get past the first post with the Environment Agency in submitting business cases. So we're not committing ourselves to anything, but aside from striving to try and secure funding and put that in place. So this is not us saying NFDC, right, we wanted future financial plans to be committing to, these significant numbers.
Thank you very much. I'll be able to sleep now.
Thank you, Steve. Mel.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's a really good report, and that was quite a good sort of thumbnail pressing of where we are with that. And it is challenging. It's technically challenging, but you've got a strategy to deal with it. The big challenge, apart from the sea itself, is the money. But I will be failing in my duty as a councillor if I didn't point out two things. One of them, the majority of members in here come from the east of the forest. And like any good strategy, you're in danger of being outflanked by the sea when it cascades over the waterside, because raising sea levels are not just at Barton-on-Sea. Now, I totally accept that we should follow this through. Totally agree with that. But we need a strategy, because you mentioned at the beginning there's no plans to do that. Well, that's a failure. We need a strategy for the east, from Lymington down to Redbridge, because it's all very well protecting the houses in Barton-on-Sea. Totally support that. But when everyone in Fawley, Hythe and Dibden is knee-deep in seawater, we won't think that's very funny, right? So we need a strategy for the east of the forest, because that is correct. You're defending the small d because I know it's not responsibility, I got that earlier, right? But we as a local authority, if we've got strategy for one coastline, we should have a strategy for the other, because a lot of people live on the waterside. It's also the area where all the development that's going to bring great wealth to the district is going to be located. So we really need to go back, in as part of this, we need to go back to the Cabinet and say we need to put time and effort into a strategy for the East. Totally understand we haven't got the money to do either of these, totally get that, but we need a strategy because it's the right thing to do and it's the appropriate thing to do. And we're defending all the coastline. We've done a great job with this and it's just all tribute to the work. I know a lot of hard work's gone into this and I know how difficult it is, but we do need to replicate that in the East. And I will bang the drum for the East, as I'm sure the other members will, until we have that strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Steve, you had made reference to that in your presentation as to the area from Hurstpit to Redbridge.
Yeah, I can add sort of a little bit to that. Yeah, and I did reference it. I mean, for that side, responsibility really falls under the Environment Agency, and they're the driver also for Hurst to Lymington. As EA have responsibility for coastal flooding. So NFDC is Coast Protection Authority, it's erosion, which is the prime impact at Christchurch Bay. So the EA are the driver for the eastern side, and they are, as I sort of mentioned, they have in their long-term forward plan. So it's not a case of them not wanting to do that. It's a case, I think, working through, Hurst to Lymington and funding requirements for that area. And I do engage with them, and we do raise that. So it's on their agenda.
Come back.
Yes, Malcolm.
I suspected that will be a response. But we as an authority need to be pushing it up their agenda as a priority because it is an issue. And we need to be forcefully engaging with the Environment Agency, because I've had experience of them as well, to really push it up the agenda, because every area of our coastline is as important as the rest, and protecting residents at both ends is as important as the rest.
Thank you, Malcolm. Peter?
Councillor Peter Armstrong, I'm grateful we don't print paper reports anymore, which we used to. So we're not destroying trees on this one, because this is a substantial report, which I think we're all grateful for the expertise and the knowledge of Steve's team that have worked on this, that we have such a team in the council who actually are highly involved. And I know other councils have used their expertise at different parts of the coastline. So thank you very much. And I can see when we look at this report, this is likely to, I don't know the word impress, but when we go for grant funding in any form, in one way or another, we have a substantial plan that people will actually take notice of because of the content, because of the thought in it, and because of everything that has been put in it. We have a team that have put an excellent report together, and Steve and his team need to be congratulated for that. I think that's important. So there's different things. The thing is, King Canute didn't do much in stopping the tide, and I'm not sure we're going to stop the tide, as Steve knows, but this report gives so many ways that we can seek to prevent coastal erosion, and Barton especially, with the way that the whole geology there, and coming from the New Forest with the water running through the whole system there, is a nightmare for any council. But thank you, Steve, for this report. I think that's what I want to say. But with funders, have you any hope that the new government will address the coastal problem?
I think first of all, I think thank you for recognising what the team have done. I would also really stress the amount of work, because BCP have led this, and they have got a great team. It has been a joint effort, but I think recognition to BCP and their consultants, AECOM, because it's not all down to us. But it's nice to have that appreciation. The new government, I think it's too early to to tell yet, and I don't think I can comment any more on that, really.
No.
Can we approach the new Environment Minister with that report? Would that help?
I'm sure over time, as they get into their position, because this is happening obviously nationally, so there will be lots of authorities and coastal groups that represent lots of authorities that will be raising sort of these matters of funding.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Peter. Adam.
Councillor Adam Parker, Brockenhurst and Denny Lodge. Thank you, Steve and team, for the report. It's a good read, and also thank you, Councillor Wade, for his comments about climate change and sea level rise. I think it's got to be top of, foremost in our mind when discussing these topics. I must admit, I'm a new broom here, relatively, and I don't want to tread on anyone's toes, but I do have some questions and comments about a very specific part of this. So I'm known for walking sort of 100 kilometres a week along that cliff top. I'm very, very familiar with it, and certainly specific parts of it. And I have to say, I'm quite surprised that Tadderford, the option there is described as do nothing, because the cliff top erosion there is really quite considerable. And, when I think of there being options, I think of there being options plural, like perhaps build a groin or do something of, significant material substance. Maybe I'm off the mark there and speaking out of turn, I don't know. But I did actually contact the council years ago, before I was elected, asking about the situation down at Tadderford and Barton-on-Sea, because I was curious to know several things. Do we actually know who owns that land now? Because I know that was a hindrance towards doing anything in terms of tidying things up. For example, there are some gabion baskets which sort of go along the cliff top that have collapsed. I sort of mentioned that this is a bit of a health and safety risk. I've seen people clambering over those things, looking ready to fall, and it still seems to be the case sort of years later. We seem to be sort of, financially speaking, the poor cousin of BCP in terms of groin refresh budgets, because I know how much money goes into rebuilding works and those kind of budgets. And I wonder, is it really an option for Tadderford to do nothing?
Yeah, I think so. Across the frontage, Tadderford, that unit, sort of between Barton and Hallwell Cliff, is no active intervention. Within the SNP that was adopted about 12 years ago, the policy there is no active intervention, and it's following that policy. That is around a couple of areas. Primarily, there is nothing to protect, and sort of being quite brutal about it, the way this works is you look at damages, assets, property that's at risk of loss, that's valued, and that's valued against the cost of works, but that's sort of simplifying it quite a bit, but there is nothing there to protect. The added point is that actually the erosion of those cliffs, I could say, is quite good. Now, as a walker, you may not see that, but with those cliffs eroding, they are adding material and sediment to the beach, and the beach is essentially the prime defence. So that's a real added benefit of having that happening, because with so many defences, generally the whole of the bay is defended. You get very little sediment, natural feed in onto those beaches, and if you were to want to defend that section, you'd either be adding beach material or structures, which would be inherently expensive with minimal benefit. And again, going back to the early stages of the development of the strategy would initially have looked at many options, which I think there were some initial options, but as you go through the development process, cost benefit of that, it's ruled out. So yeah, that's why that section is not down as being having any new defences put in, because it's not defended at the moment either.
Fair enough. Yes. I mean, there aren't many properties there. There's certainly one, I think, £4 million house, which I've admired several times on Rightmove. but not other than a farmstead. I think there isn't a great deal there. But from the perspective of a walker, which your writer points out, I do see that the cliff top is going back many, many metres every year, and the farmer there seems to keep having to bring the fence in. And I would just wonder how sustainable that is and whether that would be resolved by having a groin in place.
It wouldn't be resolved by having a groin in place. That is how that section of coastline is managed. And I think from recollection within the strategy, that property, and I know the property came on the market not too many years ago, I think is at the outer edges of the sort of 100-year assessment zone, and even a property valued at that would not warrant the level of expenditure that would be required to protect that piece of coastline.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's great to hear the report. It seemed like I asked this question when I first got elected because I really thought that I could do something for the residents of our area. With the water flooding so deep you couldn't even get through there in your wellies across, you know, some of the Shaw Road area, and the shops flooding all over Christmas, that everything was completely ruined. I just feel that every way I ask, I'm told it's the environmental agency or some other, you know, agency. How do we find out what they're actually doing? Because I remember asking you last time when you did the report and you said 2024, which seemed years away, and of course we're here now. But when will we know what's happening? Because I tried to talk to the environmental agency when they were at the open day out in the garden here, and they all just sort of said things like, oh, I don't know your area, and, you know, kind of fobbed me off even then. So I don't feel like I was in safe hands. I gave them my card and asked them to write to me and just say, could they give me an update on our area? But we can see what's happening where we are, the same as they can in the West. But you know, like Leap and Cowshot, I've never seen the erosion so bad as it is now. I mean, there used to be a tree line. There's no trees there now. So we're all in the same boat. I just want to know, is High, the village, you know, where the water comes over into Waitrose, where we could flood houses, and some of the residents there are quite expert in flooding now. What can we tell them? We just tell them they're under the environmental agency. Is that the answer?
I think generally it is, because the EA have that responsibility for coastal flooding. I think it's important to note that the majority of the frontage, so from eastern side of Lymington River to Redbridge, which is the rest of our boundary, is predominantly private and predominantly undefended. But it is the Environment Agency. And I can't remember if you were present or not, but a year or two ago, one of their officers did come in and presented to panel about plans and proposals. I'm more than happy to pick up with that officer again and you know, for further information. But they, you know, he did come in here and did a very good presentation on how they manage and what they have to manage, sort of coastal and fluvial wide as well for within the district. But it is ultimately their responsibility. Plus, they would be the funders of a strategy. And as I said earlier, they have sort of broad projects within forward plans. But again, you know, like us and many others, they have limited budgets and their priorities are being worked through. So, yeah, I don't think there's much else we can add on you know, with regard to that waterside area at the moment.
Thank you. Having been explained that if we go ahead with this, we're not allowing ourselves to be caught for any money at the end of it, I'd like to propose that we go ahead with it so as we can finalise the plan and see if we can get the money together. So I propose we go ahead with this plan.
The council via the committee, so that it is in our process of recommendation. Thank you, Alan. Malcolm.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with Councillor de Grasse's right. I think we should do that for that area. I've just got to take one issue, the officers. An FDC is responsible for some of it because you own High Promenade. We have a problem with one of the flats, return vows under that, and that floods the village on a regular basis, which I have, I think, already mentioned to officers about this. And we need it fixed because this is something that is our responsibility as an authority, and we need to get that fixed because that will stop some of the flooding, not all, but some of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Did you want anything to say?
Nothing to say about that.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, thank you, Malcolm. Yes, you're aware that I've got your email and colleagues are looking at that, and on behalf of the resident who's raised that through you, and we'll endeavour to get a response. We've asked our corporate property team to look at that from an asset perspective.
Fine, thank you. I have no further speakers, so I refer you to page 3 of agenda item papers, which number 1 is the recommendations that we are proposing from this panel to Cabinet. It's listed under number 1, recommendations on there, of which there are 4. And I was going to take them as a group and ask that you approve this recommendation to Cabinet. Can I have your agreement, please? Thank you very much. Right. We're now on to item 5, portfolio holders update. This, and my first one I have on my list is Councillor Blunden, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Blunden, portfolio holder for environment and sustainability. Firstly, I thank Steve and the team for an excellent report. I think if reports go by the weight of paper, it certainly hit the mark. I'm sure you found it a real eye-opener on the coastal challenges, particularly the partnership funding, and that's, as we go forward, that's going to be the key to it. Locally, I'm pleased that we've now successfully removed all the damaged beach huts from Hordle Cliff, and also we were able to complete the repair to the seawall at Milford. Tomorrow the team meet Milford Parish Council. Now I think a sort of a regular update meeting with those local members, which I think they find very useful as part of our good communication. On changing places, April saw the completion and opening of 2 new facilities, supplementing our public conveniences. Changing places is an initiative that provides the extra equipment and space to enable people with profound and multiple learning disabilities or physical disabilities such as spinal injuries to use toilets safely and comfortably. Such facilities allow anyone, regardless of their disability, to go into shops, attend appointments, enjoy community life, social, and travel, all the things that most of us take entirely for granted every day. I was delighted that by successfully bidding for central government funding, the council has added 2 more of these facilities. At Ringwood, a standalone unit was installed near the existing public conveniences, and at Brockenhurst, amended layouts to the existing toilet block meant that changes spaces for facilities could be incorporated. This brings the total number of these facilities to 6, and that really shows our ongoing commitment to creating and maintaining an inclusive district where everyone can enjoy spending time in the New Forest. Moving on to the Let It Be campaign, During May and June, our teams once again, where possible, reduce cutting of grassed areas under the banner this year of Let It Be. This aligned us with many other councils, landowners and residents who have always recognised the importance of leaving grass to grow at this time of year to increase the number of species and help pollinators. Teams were careful not to cause obstructions which could impact on sightlines at junctions. This was a successful year, and the team are now back out mowing from June onwards, because other garden flowers and wildflowers are blooming, and they act as the main pollinator source. Success also was very close to home, because if you look outside an apple tree court this year, orchids have been seen growing in some areas. Moving on to our garden waste collections. Going back to April saw the first collections of the wheeled bins carried out in the district. We now have the highest number of customers we have ever seen, over 23,000, and that's only just 4 months in. In April, the tonnages we collected for composting increased from 500 to 800 tonnes. Previously, this material may have been sent for incineration or driven to local household waste recycling centres, but our new scheme now means that people have an improved service collecting it from their doorsteps. I just mentioned street scene team. The team have recently attended New Milton Town Council and gave an excellent presentation entitled Overview of Grounds Maintenance and Litter Challenges. The presentation was very well received, and also, I think, very useful feedback on grass cutting and litter collection, as you would expect. I think a meeting is also arranged with Milford Parish Council for August. We've had the Crabby campaign, that's keeping on the litter theme, and the A35 litter project running throughout the summer. You'll no doubt recall that NFDC commissioned an in-depth study to explore littering behaviours, and you'll shortly be seeing a sculpture made entirely from rubbish and recycled materials on show across the district to promote that anti-litter message. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jeff. Did you want to make any reference to the dashboard that we've got in our papers?
No, I'm happy to, thank you, Chairman, I'm happy to take questions on any of the dashboard subjects.
Well, I'm pleased to see there's no reds.
Malcolm.
Malcolm, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had some questions on the dashboard. Now, my previous experience of dashboards and key performance indicators are tools for improvement. We review performance, and if it's green, and there's lots of greens on the planning one, it's great. Amber, there or thereabout, but if you're not hitting the target, it's red. But we have two challenges on yours. A lot of them are monitor. Now, monitor is not setting the target. Monitor's saying someone's building a wall badly. Oh, they're doing it again. We've monitored that. This isn't setting a target for improvement, looking at what we're doing. The next question is, why are they in grey? If we haven't hit the target, it becomes grey. Is that because we've run out of red ink, or we don't do it the way, or we have got a different approach? Now, I noticed we've got lots of greens, we've got amber on the planning one, but when we're not hitting the target, we don't accept it should be red. And then we should have a reason how we turn that red to amber to green, because it's not an improvement. Then you find out what's going wrong, and then work out what action you can do to improve it. And this is not a political point. This is about this authority improving its performance, because it is performance review. But saying we're going to monitor this, okay, yeah, fine. But it doesn't do anything. It's not improving. We're just seeing that is there should be targets, and we should be reacting to that. And we should be challenging you on when it's not green or it's not amber, when it's red. And you should be coming up with reasons why and what you're going to do to change that. because it's pointless having them unless we're doing that. Total wasted time. The officers might be going to do something else more important, perhaps do a strategy for the East. Anyway, but the point is, I'm joking about, this is a serious point, and I would like a response. Why are we not using these tools for improvement? Why would we have grey on it when it should be red, amber?
Yes, Councillor Wade, I think numerous times when you've made this point, and I think I've responded also. This is actually the last quarter from 1st of January to the 31st of March 2004, so it's last year. Now these are old dashboards. Now there is a new dashboard which will shortly come into place, where I'm confident the points that you've raised, where possible, they will be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Peter, please. Adam.
Councillor Blunden, I understood that when we took down a tree, we would plant others. The dashboard is rather short of this. It says trees removed this quarter 549, trees planted 150. Could you explain that discrepancy?
Yes, I can indeed. It is still the policy to plant 2 for 1. However, you can't plant trees all the year round. So it is loaded to actually in the autumn when all the trees start to be planted, and you will see that you'll catch up at that stage.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Jeff. Well, we'll look forward to the Christmas dashboard then, going blue. Thank you very much. I have another. Adam, please.
Councillor Adam Parker, Brockenhurst and Denny Lodge. Thank you, Councillor Blunden, for your report. I've got a couple of things I'd like to comment on. The let it be issue must be one of the most contentious issues in Brockenhurst, based on feedback I'm getting from people. Now, as a Green, I fundamentally support it in principle, but I wonder if there's some scope for doing things a bit differently in certain areas. For example, and this is very local and specific, but within New Forest Drive, I think it would really benefit some of the vergers from having wildflower meadows sown and something along those lines, because A, it's more attractive, and I think that's fundamentally a lot of residents' complaints about it, but also it probably would help more in terms of helping the bees and insects and things. And on that point, I certainly have just been through a period of very protracted leafleting all around the district. And I have to say that what seems to be the mass insect death around here is profound and noticeable. I mean, you just don't see insects at all in some parts. You hear some birds, but, you know, are we actually tracking whether Let It Be No Mo May is being successful in terms of insect health? And to be clear, this is not a criticism of the policy. I fundamentally agree with it. We need to be doing everything we can and going great guns to help the bees and the insects. But are we actually tracking that? And then the other point is on the Brockenhurst toilets, again, very local and specific. I was very pleased about the Changing Places revamp, but unfortunately, only a very small minority of people actually see that because it's under lock and key. In fact, the parish councillors couldn't observe it. And I have to say the traders and residents are really up in arms about the state of the gents' toilet. I know that, you know, Brockenhurst isn't alone in having issues with toilets generally, but as it's come up, it would be remiss for me not to flag that and also plead that we get bumped up the list for a renovation for the gents' toilet in Brock. Thank you.
I'll try and take those in reverse order, if I may. On the toilets at Brockenhurst, they have been subjected to a lot of graffiti, and as many toilets are across the district, it's one of those unfortunate which happens. The team are on the case fairly rapidly. but they have priorities right the way across the district. So it is dealt with. On the revamping of toilets, of course, that is done on a basis of need, because there is a budget for it, so there is a mechanism of confirming which toilet needs to go first. I know that's probably not the answer that you want. We've had a conversation on the phone on Brockenhurst toilets, but that is a situation. I noticed recently the toilets have had some decoration done by members of the public, I believe, which is, I can probably understand some frustration, but that really is not a way to go forward. It needs to be referred to NFDC in the normal way, reporting any defects, and let the appropriate action taken to be, it needs to be taken. It is not the way just to have public redecorating, because you don't know, are they using the right material? So I would mention that. If I can come back to the Let It Be campaign, yes, always with these, with the approach to that, we take on board comments. So it's very much a learning curve, and rightly it should be. It's not cast in stone every year. We rely on feedback from the parishes, from the general public, so that tweaks can be made. And if you look at this year, as against last year, some improvements were made on that following feedback. And as we go forward, the same will happen again. I quite like planting wildflowers and stuff like that, because I think that's a good move. But you've got to put it in the context. We have got to maintain it. So each site needs to be looked at its merits.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Peter, yes, please.
Councillor Peter Armstrong again. Councillor Blunden, we had up at the parish yesterday someone talking about ragwort. There is absolutely more ragwort than I've ever seen up and down our roads. And we know that's poisonous to ponies, and especially being close to the New Forest. Can I ensure that you're talking to counterparts, especially in Hampshire, and we have responsibility for some of their verges, that something is enacted to deal with ragwort, because it's poisonous, as we know, for ponies, and it is the worst I've ever seen it this year up and down some of our roads. I know, especially on the water side I'm talking about. Is there something that can be done or representation made so that there's a joined up thinking on this?
Certainly, I'll pick that up and try and get some answers on that. If I just make one point, you mentioned that we have responsibility. We don't have responsibility in highway verges. We have a contract which is cutting verges on that, but that is what we have.
Anybody else?
All right, thank you. Stephanie, please.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for raising that. I've been saying the same thing. I used to, work in farming quite a lot, and ragwort was a very, very serious thing to remove. Not cut it, it must be completely removed and bagged and then taken away and burnt, because the seeds travel into the grazing areas that could be on the forest here, or it could be in the fields, and the seeds will reseed, and we've got a terrible problem. In fact, I mentioned it when I went to Exxon that they had masses of it and they didn't know what it was. They said it's a lovely yellow plant. I said, no, seriously, I thought that might be the answer today, Jeffrey, but it's not. So it's just a case of people aren't realising that that's taken over and it will poison our livestock.
Yes, as I say, I'll certainly make sure that's followed up. Your point is correct. You don't cut ragwort, you pull ragwort. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Jeff. I'll get on to the next portfolio holder, Derek Tipp, with his dashboard.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Derek Tipp, Economy and Planning Portfolio. Let me start by just going through some of the highlights of our portfolio this year, which are in the public domain under the other committee. Planning and economy portfolio highlights: 995 planning decisions issued, £945,000 spent in recreational mitigation projects, and 50 businesses engaged with the New Forest Apprenticeship and Skills Hub. 140 businesses and residents benefited from start-up business support. And finally, I mentioned that £100,000 in funding has been secured to improve digital planning processes. So those are a few highlights there. Now we also are at the moment involved with the regeneration of Totton. We had a meeting only this week for the Totton Regeneration Partnership, and we have now agreed, subject to approval from Tottenham Ealing Town Council, to commission a master plan for Totton. So we are beginning to make progress on that front. Very important issue. Getting on to the, and I'm going to steal Malcolm's thunder here and talk about key performance indicators. I think the only one that we've got that is not green is the film New Forest. And I'll give you the reason why that isn't green. It's because it was affected by the Writers Guild of America strike. And apparently that strike was so hard-hitting and so effective that it affected film making all over. But now the strike has been solved, and Filming in England, which is part of Creative UK, is confident that UK location inquiries will return to former levels. So that's good news, isn't it? On the local plan, we have started on this now. We're looking at the evidence base, and we're commissioning work on housing needs, study on that, and open space needs for sports pitches, play facilities, etc. And we're also looking at requirements of the travelling community, the business community, etc. And we are engaging with the Environment Agency, the County Council, the National Park, etc. And there will be a statement of community involvement to go out to consultation probably around October this year. And in February 25, we expect to find issues and options consultation will go out to the public, and we will find out what the public think, what they want, and a full draft probably next October, that sort of time scale. And we will be commencing our member working group, which was put on hold because of the election, and that's going to start again in around September time. We've got a new man in post, but he's been in post since March, in development management, Mark Wyatt. And unfortunately, our fee income is slightly down. And on the staffing front, we have 1.5 vacancies in the planning, in the development management department. And let's see. Nationally significant infrastructure projects. You probably read that there's a new project that's just been made public, and that's the Solent CO2 pipeline from Exxon, and that's going to have to go out to sea to bury their CO2 in rocks. And there are various different routes that they're looking at, and we're being consulted on that one. That's very new, quite interesting one, that. And the other one, of course, is the ABP Strategic Land Reserve. And that's one of the tax sites of the Freeport, and that, well, we haven't anything definite yet, but there are things being developed for that. Okay, SIL. We have quite a lot of SIL money, and we'll be gathering even more SIL money over the next 5 years if our building projects go ahead, and that's not including Fawley Waterside. But we do expect to have quite a lot of SIL money, and we've got some projects that we're looking at. A number of projects are being considered to spend SIL money on. to improve the infrastructure all around the district. So that's that. And I think that's about it, Chairman.
Malcolm. Thank you, Derek. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chairman. It's only fair that I ask you a few questions as well. I share your positivity about the SIL money, and presumably this council will once again be putting another £1 million up for local organisations to apply for in this year. If you could confirm that, that would be. That's the first question. The second question is, and I share your euphoria that the scriptwriters of America are no longer on strike. But I question the performance of this council. Really, we are a KPI is the value of filming in the district and the number of locations available for films. You could put in here about Fawley Waterside, number of developments that aren't going forward as a KPI, or how we are engaging with things. Far more important than two very minor things to do with filming, of which this district doesn't have a lot of influence in Hollywood, or indeed any other studio, I would imagine, unless you can correct me if I'm wrong. So surely we must be able to think of better KPIs than some filming. Those are the two questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Well, as Councillor Blunden has alluded to earlier, this is the last of the present key performance indicators and refers to the 2020 to 2024 plan. So we're now embarking on a new strategy. We've got new performance indicators, and we will do our best to make those as relevant and up to date and so on as we can. But of course, sometimes things can't always be reported to a timetable. We have to wait. Perhaps sometimes they're annual reports, and sometimes it takes a little while to gather the information in. So we can't be sure of that. And on the question of the SIL money, we are looking at that now, and we do expect to be announcing something shortly on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, Derek. Alan, you're next.
Two things. Firstly, Fawley was working out a parish plan, but we understand that the new government has come in and said that they're going to change all the ways of setting up parish plans and all their effectiveness. What are we doing in the light of this to make sure that what plans we're doing will remain effective? The second point is purely of information. Fawley Parish Council have just awarded a contract to build changing spaces as well. Thank you.
At the moment, we have to stick with the existing rules around plans, but obviously, in a way, what the government is going to say, we can't predict the past. We have to wait until they've actually put some plans in progress. And in the meantime, we just have to work on the basis of existing. I know it's an ever-changing system, isn't it? I mean, you never know what the government might do tomorrow. But, I think we have to work on the basis that the rules are as they are until we're told that they've changed. Okay.
Thank you. Peter.
So, Councillor Tipp, I'm so pleased to see the e-news is a KPI after I raised that last year, and good to see that exceeded 3,000 targets. But as we know, there are many, many, many more thousands of businesses across our area. So may that start to continue to grow. And I hope that the business unit will continue to advertise their services and somehow get out to the businesses that don't even know it exists over the next year. And that hopefully was a commitment that you can give me.
We'll do our very best. And thank you for raising it.
Right. That's everyone. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time, Derek. Item 6 then, the work programme panel. It's at the back of your papers. Next meeting is going to be the 12th of September. At that September meeting, we will be considering the updated timeline for the rollout of the new waste and recycling collection service. We'll be seeing Chris again at our next meeting. And I won't say what he's going to talk about because we'll call it waste this time instead of rubbish. Okay. And that leads us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for everybody coming, officers, for your presentation. I now declare the meeting closed.